The DNC has done some shenanigans with the primary process this year. What they have done is to strip me of any delegates that I might get in the election here, but they can't strip you of your significance. And that's why your primary matters no matter what, because the country is looking. And the country is not thinking delegate count, certainly not at first. They're thinking about what the voters in a particular state had to say. And you are first, no matter what. And so when I speak to a voter in a primary state, an early primary state, first of all, it's very moving for me. I saw this last time and I see it this time as well. Not only in New Hampshire, also in South Carolina, Nevada, now Michigan. Voters in the early primary states take your job very seriously, and you should. You have a power to decide what is the conversation that will dominate this campaign season. The conversation that dominates the campaign season means the conversation that will greatly influence the election, and in that sense, greatly influence the world. And you can hear me well enough, correct? So the way I see it, my being here today, is part of a job interview. You are interviewing the candidates. President Biden has one agenda for the country. I have another agenda for the country. Robert Kennedy has another agenda for the country. The Republican candidates have another agenda for the country, and so forth. My agenda for the country means what I would do with the levers of power of the executive branch of the U.S. government if you gave me the honor of placing those levers in my hand. But I'm very clear about what I think and what I think needs to be done. So I'm very grateful to have this opportunity to tell you. To me, America has gone awry. And when I say that it's gone awry, clearly polls show that the majority of Americans agree with me about that, whether we are on the left or on the right. Something's wrong. And for those of us, by the way, speaking to these ladies here, for those of us who are old enough, we remember a time when it was not this messed up. I don't think any of us want to romanticize the past or whitewash the past, but we do remember a time long ago, right, called the 1970s. And it's important that we remember that in the 1970s, the average American had decent benefits and could afford a house. The average American could afford a car. The average American could afford a yearly vacation. The average American couple could afford for one member of the couple to stay home so that they could take care of the children if that was what they wished. And the average American couple could afford to send their kids to college. Now, that sounds so long ago and far away, and obviously those circumstances no longer hold. That was a thriving middle class. We do not have a thriving middle class today. The middle class in the United States has been hollowed out. And it's been hollowed out systematically, according to an agenda often called trickle-down economics, neoliberalism, vulture capitalism, whatever you want to call it, stockholder capitalism. When we were growing up, there was this social agreement, as it were, that a corporation should care, that there were a lot of stakeholders. The stockholders are stakeholders, but the worker is also a stakeholder. The environment is a stakeholder. The community is a stakeholder. But with the advent of trickle-down economics, the idea was, oh, no. Everything should be arranged so that the stockholders can get as rich as possible, and the CEO class, and then see, that'll be good. And it was this huge con, to be honest, that was played on the American people with this notion that if you give all your money to the stockholders, that will be good because they will be job creators, and then the money will trickle down and it will lift all boats. This was a tragic ruse. All these years later, it's clear, not only did it not lift all boats, it actually left millions and millions and millions of people without even a life vest. There's a reason for that, because their business model was not job creation. Their business model was job elimination. Their business model was job and worker exploitation. So through demonizing unions, suppressing unions, union busting, through tax cuts for the very, very wealthy, through this almost orgiastic interest in cutting regulations, job-killing regulations they were called. These were safety regulations. These were regulations that had to do with the well-being of workers and community. Actually, if anything, they were job producing because you needed more people to work for the organization to make sure that the regulations were adhered to. So what we ended up with was a systematic decimation of the middle class of the United States, this $50 trillion transfer of wealth, which actually came from the bottom 90% of Americans. Now, the beneficiaries of this change amount to a matrix of corporate overlords. It's the insurance companies, which is why we don't have universal insurance. Like every other advanced democracy. It's pharmaceutical companies, which is why we have 1.3 million people rationing their insulin, unlike in any other advanced democracy, because they have universal health care. It's why we have a climate crisis the way we do, because of the institutionalized greed of big oil companies. It's why we have unsafe streets, including our schools, because of the institutionalized greed of gun manufacturers. It's why we have carcinogens in our food, because of the institutionalized greed of big food companies, big agricultural companies, which have ruined our farming sector. It's why we have chemicals that hurt the brain of a child in our pesticides, because of the chemical companies. It's why we have predatory lending, the overreach of banks, and it is why we have wars that have actually been fought for really no other reason than to add to the coffers of the defense industry. Now that sounds tragic, but we are mature adult Americans, and it is our job to look at these things and to not pretend that it's anything less severe than it is. But it's also important not only that we acknowledge what's wrong, it's also important that we take a mature look at what it will take to make it right. I'm running for president because if we keep electing those people, it's not going to be made right. The system will not disrupt itself. Washington has now become a system of legalized bribery, particularly since the Citizens United decision by the Supreme Court. Corporations have unlimited power to influence our elections. They've turned Washington into a system of legalized bribery where over and over and over again, our legislators do more to serve the bottom line of short-term profit maximization for their donors than to serve the safety, health, and well-being of the American people. Now, I think as a country, it serves us, just as it does as individuals, to learn about where we come from. And when you learn about where you come from, you get clearer about where you are. When you understand what your ancestors went through, you understand more about yourself. And you also, I think, become, you have a greater, more heightened sense of responsibility to the generations that come after you. And I think that this is a time in our history where it really serves us to remember the trajectory of American history, because it illumines our path in very important ways. In 1776, our Declaration of Independence was signed by 56 very brave men. They were very brave because if the British had won the war, they would have been executed as traitors against the King of England. They established with their signatures the most socially as well as politically enlightened principles that had ever formed the foundational principles of a nation. And those four main principles in the Declaration of Independence are our mission statement. And just like an individual having a mission statement, a company having a mission statement, John Adams said he hoped we would return to these principles every July 4th. Get on the same page. Everybody remember who we are and why we're here. Those four principles were radical in 1776, and they are radical today. Number one, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. Now that's right there repudiates all tyranny, and this is what Abraham Lincoln said. He said that the Declaration of Independence is an eternal rebuke to forces of tyranny and oppression. If all men are created equal, that means that's different than the divine right of kings. That's different than saying that a monarch and an aristocracy are entitled to all the power. Rather, all men are created equal. Second, it says that God gave inalienable rights of life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness, which I would think of today as what we call self-actualization, to everyone. Number three, that governments are instituted to secure those rights. It's government's purpose to secure our rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And number four, if government's not doing its job, it's the right of the people to alter it or to abolish it. Now, it is according to those principles, that was the moral and political basis of abolition. If all men are created equal, you can't have slavery. It was the moral and political basis of women's suffrage movement. If all men are created equal, you can't say men can vote, but women can't. If all men are created equal, that was the moral and political basis of the establishment of the labor unions. You can't have a situation where those with money are able to lord over everyone else and basically make everyone else their servant. That goes against the principles of the Declaration of Independence. And the Declaration of Independence is the moral and political basis of the civil rights movement. Once again, if all men are created equal, segregation will not hold. It's our turn now. Because what we are dealing with in our country is the latest example of the overreach by forces that would actually squash and transgress against the principles of the Declaration of Independence. What was true in 1776 is that while 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence established extraordinary principles of freedom and liberty, 41 of those signers were slave owners. That's so profound if you think about it, and it defines the American struggle. The American struggle is between those whose hearts are ablaze with the possibilities of the ideal of American liberty and have proven throughout our history their willingness to struggle, to sacrifice, and even to die for them. And then there have always been forces from the beginning who, for their own ideological and financial purposes, have no intention whatsoever of seeing those principles made manifest, and have proven, once again throughout our history, the truly atrocious lengths that they will go to make sure that they are not. Now, in the past, our ancestors said, well, we just got to get rid of slavery. We've got to pass the 19th Amendment. We've got to establish organized labor. We've got to desegregate, dismantle segregation, pass the Civil Rights Act, pass the Voting Rights Act. Today, it's the same, but it's more complicated. Because today it is not a specific institution. It is an economic paradigm that holds our government hostage. It is an economic paradigm that puts short-term profits for huge corporate interests before the safety, health, and well-being of the American people. And that is why there are carcinogens in our food, and that is why 46% of our water supply in the urban areas is filled with PFAS, and that is why there are pesticides, chemicals that harm a child's brain in our pesticides. That is why there are toxins in the air. That is why our schools are not safe. That is why our climate is as catastrophic as it is and unanswered the way it should be by a great nation. And that is why we have fought wars for no other reason than to fill the coffers of the defense industry. That will not change unless we change it. The abolitionists didn't emerge from a political party. It emerged from the abolitionist movement. And by the way, some people I've met in the Granite State don't seem to know, and you should know, that among white Americans, a lot of the abolitionist movement emerged from early evangelical churches in New Hampshire. So it didn't come from a political party. Same with the women's suffrage movement. It didn't come from a political party. It came from the Women's Party. It came from women themselves. Same with organized labor, and the same with the civil rights movement and Martin Luther King Jr. This idea that all that happens politically is that which is to emerge from a political party is a deeply problematic idea, particularly since these political parties have become today just another corporate entity. It's not just that the DNC and the RNC chop wood and carry water for the corporate donors that will fortify their power. They don't just serve corporate interests, they are a corporate interest. And this is exactly what George Washington warned us about. In his farewell address, he said that political parties, he feared, would become factions of men more loyal to their party than to their country. John Adams, in fact, said he saw them as the greatest threat to our democracy. Now, I'm running as a Democrat. I think of myself as a Roosevelt Democrat, but I believe that the soul of the Democratic Party has been hollowed out, just as the soul of the Republican Party has been hollowed out. Some people think the answer is to run third party. Some people think the answer is to run with a traditional political party. I don't think there's a right answer to that or a wrong answer to that. I think everybody follows the voice within themselves that makes them feel where they can best be of use and of service. I want to see a new beginning in this country. I want to see us cut the cord with this aberrational chapter of history by which corporate power has transgressed, has tyrannized the American people. I want to cut the cord with that aberrational chapter, and I want to begin again. I want to begin a season of repair. This has ruined people's lives. People have died in wars that should not have been fought. Children have asthma that they should not have. There are cancer rates, such as in your own state. There is a homelessness rate. There is a highest level of poverty rate in any advanced nation is here in the United States. There are so many examples of stress on people's bodies, stress on people's minds and hearts, stress on communities, and stress on the earth itself. This is unsustainable. And this is the urgency of this message. This cannot continue. There are too many stress points. And my contention, and what I submit to you, is it's going to break one way or the other. It's like some people need to read about the French Revolution here. It's going to break one way or the other. It is either going to break in the direction of a radical rededication to democracy and to justice, or it's going to break in the direction of dystopia, chaos, neo-authoritarianism, and possibly worse. I feel, as Franklin Roosevelt said during the Great Depression, he says, it has become clear to me we must become radical for at least a generation. But radical is not a word that we should fear. The Declaration of Independence is radical. The radicalism that we should fear is the radicalism of the last 50 years. It is radical that we have allowed corporate forces to dominate and tyrannize the American people the way we have. But in order to step in order for the people to step in, we have to break free of the tyranny. The first corporate tyranny that we have to deal with is the political party itself, in my case, the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party now says that the fascists are at the door and that we all have to line up and support President Biden. So this is what I'd like to say about that. First of all, I have no personal animus against the president. There's nothing personal about any of this. And I, as a Democrat, am very grateful that the president defeated Donald Trump in 2020. The point is that 2024 will be a very different kind of election. In 2020, people were just so afraid of Donald Trump. It was just whoever can beat Trump. And that's good, and he deserves credit for that. 2024 will be more like 2016. The danger for Democrats, for those of you who are Democrats, the danger in 2024 is not Donald Trump. Stop obsessing everybody about Donald Trump. Those who support Donald Trump are going to vote for Donald Trump. You're not going to convince them otherwise. We're going to tell them he's a fascist as though they don't know. You're going to tell them how many indictments he has as though they don't know. It's almost like, and unfortunately the polls prove this, and his fundraising proves this, the more we say it, the greater his support. So let's just get off of that right now and realize that the greater danger is not Donald Trump. The greater danger is how many people should we not offer something far more than Bidenomics and let me finish the job, will simply choose to stay home. And I'm particularly concerned about Gen Z, 37% of the voting demographic, who are not in the mood, I assure you, to vote for someone who was given more oil drilling permits than even Trump did, and who approved the Willow Project, the $8 billion ConocoPhillips oil extraction project on the North Slopes of Alaska, even while saying that he's the big climate president because of his healthy investments in the Inflation Reduction Act and green energy. But if you're with one hand, on your left hand, you are investing in green energy, but then on the right hand, you are giving more oil drilling permits that will actually nullify the benefits of the green investments, then something is very, very wrong. And people who think about it can see that. And I assure you that the young people do. Now, the DNC, the role of the political party traditionally, they're not mentioned in the Constitution, and their role traditionally is to stay in the background until the people have spoken. They're not supposed to be determining who the candidate is. You are supposed to be determining who the candidate is. The voters are supposed to be, with their votes, determining who the candidate is, and then the political party is to enter into the situation and support the candidate. Right now, in a way, once again, very aberrational, it's simply the climax of something that has been going on now for three seasons, campaign seasons. The DNC now says that its job, as it sees it, is to re-elect the president. And you and I are not supposed to even question whether or not he would be the strongest whether or not he would be the strongest candidate in 2024. I don't believe that Bidenomics has been so great and give me a chance to finish the job is the greatest we can offer to the American people in 2024. Why is that? Because if you're among 80% of the people of the United States, Bidenomics has not done anything for you. To say to a person who doesn't have a car and can't afford a car, be excited about the infrastructure bill because you're going to have better freeways, actually makes people angry and only proves how abandoned they are in their time of need. So at this point, if you were 20% of the top earners in the United States, yeah, the economy is doing well. But that's an island surrounded by a vast sea of economic despair. When you look at the cancer rates here in the Granite State, when you look at the poverty rate, when you look at the hunger rate, this is what's really happening in America. Now, I live in Washington, D.C. There are some certainly nice people there. This does not have to do with nice people versus not nice people. And not every rich person is a greedy bastard. It's really important, if we to reach for a soulful politics here and a deeper conversation, not to personalize any of this. But what I see in Washington, I had always been told, wow, it's like a bubble over there. It's worse than a bubble. It's like a walled city. That city, it's like an industry unto itself. That's what government has become. And there is a sense of people being so emotionally buffered from what is really going on. A friend of mine worked for the Obama administration. Now, I don't want to lay this on the feet of the Democrats because if anything, it would have even been worse under a Republican president. But it does say something about how Washington operates. She was in a meeting in the Oval Office. She had worked on the Obama campaign and they hired her. She was in the Oval Office one day where they were all having a meeting. It was something economic and someone on the Obama team said about something, well, I mean, $300 a month, what would that do for anyone anyway? And she stood up and she said, I quit. She said, in that moment, I realized how disconnected these people are from the reality of most Americans, that somebody could so cavalierly say, well, $300 a month, what would that matter? In many people's lives, it would make the difference whether or not your children had food, whether or not your children went to bed hungry. But I'm not laying that at the feet of the Democrats any more than the Republicans, please do not get me wrong. But the corporatist mentality allows children in this country to simply be collateral damage. They have no, they don't work, so they have no financial leverage. They have no, they aren't old enough to vote, so they have no political leverage. And this is one of the reasons why I want a Department of Children and Youth. And this is also why I want a Department of Peace. Even Donald Rumsfeld, who worked for George Bush, said we need to learn to wage peace. We should be as strategic, as sophisticated in our waging of peace as we are strategic and sophisticated in our waging war when we feel that we need to. The other major item, in addition to my Economic Bill of Rights, universal health care, universal tuition-free college and tech school, which we had in this country until the 1970s, whether it has to do with paid family leave, child care, guaranteed living wage. And before we get off the topic of guaranteed living wage, let me just point out, once again, we all know this, but to really take it in, to ask ourselves, what the hell is going on in this country? The minimum wage in this country is $7.25 an hour. The 1/3 of America's workforce lives on less than $15 an hour. Half of them cannot find a place to live. And in most major American cities, the living wage is $20 or more. The president had campaigned last time on raising the minimum wage. He raised the federal workers' minimum wage. He could simply unilaterally do that to 15. But when he tried to put it into the COVID relief bill, he was stopped by the parliamentarian. The parliamentarian has no actual political power. And I assure you, no Republican president allows his agenda to be stymied by a parliamentarian. When that happened to George Bush, he just fired the parliamentarian. I also want, another thing I want to do as a major agenda item, is it is time for America to end the war on drugs. The war on drugs was started in 1971 by Richard Nixon. It is now clearly established. He knew that drugs was not public enemy number one. This was a political move on his part, and it was also an indirect attack on Black Americans. We have spent $1 trillion on the war on drugs. It has certainly not helped the problem. If anything, it has made it worse. When I was in college, there were 300,000 people incarcerated in the United States, and today there are 2.3 million. Almost half of our federal prisoners are there for nonviolent drug offenses. Even more, So there are three pieces of this. A second piece is that we should treat drug addiction, and this is relevant in this state as it is around the country. We should treat drug addiction not as a criminal issue, but as a health issue, as they do in countries such as Portugal with much better results. As I said, we spent $1 trillion. Every year we spend $100 billion a year on the drug war. For a fraction of that, we could have a network of world-class recovery options, help people get sober. Instead of a drug czar, I would have a recovery czar. The third part of that is that it will help at the southern border. What are these Latin American immigrants trying to escape? In the vast majority of cases, they're trying to escape horrifying violence that is perpetrated by the drug cartels. Nothing would be better than for us to undercut their market. And that's why I go for decriminalization, ultimately legalization of many drugs. This will actually help us on the issue of fentanyl. It will actually help us because that's the one that we can really go after. So all of the things that I've mentioned to you represent a fundamental change. All of the things that I mentioned to you represent a fundamental turnaround. But I would submit to you that we need to turn around because we are headed for the iceberg. That iceberg could take many forms. But if we just take an incremental approach to fixing these things, if we only deal with the issues that I've mentioned on the level of symptom and not root cause, then the only question is whether we're headed there slow or we're headed there fast. The only issue is whether we're headed there in this direction or at another angle. I say we need to turn the ship around. I believe that I'm capable of getting us around the curve. You wouldn't be able in one presidential term to turn the ship around completely, but I believe I can get us around the curve. And I think that one of the things that I submit to you as my qualification is based on the work that I've done in my life. I think that I would be very careful and wise in this turning around. If you just need to turn a big ship around quickly, it's not going to work and it could be very chaotic. We need a wise and responsible and strategized way in which the American people are enrolled in the realization that we're going to have to make some changes in this country. We're either going to make them wisely or some changes are going to be thrust upon us that none of us are going to like. That's why I'm running for president. I think that I am a better candidate than the president to face not only Donald Trump in 2024, but in order to face Cornel West, and in order to face what appears to be what will be the candidacy of Robert Kennedy, because he is making an announcement on October 9th, and the press seems to be indicating he will not be running as a Democrat. I have as much of the passion that is anti-corporate as Robert Kennedy does, and I have as much passion for social justice as Cornel West does. And we are going to need to be able to submit a nominee in 2024 who can speak as much to those who would be tempted to vote for Cornel West or Robert Kennedy as to those who would be tempted to vote for Donald Trump. I read a book last year that completely charmed me by the great American historian Doris Kearns Goodwin. And it's called No Ordinary Time. I highly recommend it. And it's a book about Eleanor and Franklin Roosevelt during the 1930s and 40s. And she said to him, no, she didn't say to him. She was giving a speech somewhere. It was during the Depression, the time when Hitler was, was on the march. And she said to the audience, this is no ordinary time. And I believe that that's what's happening now. This is no ordinary time. And what the political establishment is trying to do is to keep the lid on it so that it can continue to treat it like an ordinary time. Franklin Roosevelt said that we wouldn't have to worry about a fascist takeover in our country as long as democracy delivered on its promises. But democracy has not delivered on its promises. The fascists should never have gotten this close to the door. And if we had universal health care, if we had tuition-free college, if we didn't have those college loan debts, if people didn't have such a hard time in terms of child care, if people were making more of a living wage, fascism would not seem so attractive to so many people. We're going to win in 2024 by offering the American people a much better deal. That's how we're going to win in 2024. Not by bragging about what's already happening, because to too many people, it's not good enough. Like I said, they might not vote for Trump, but they will definitely be tempted to stay home. I want to inspire people. I want to make people excited about a new beginning. People's lives are falling apart, and there is a spiraling down that should concern us deeply. Spiraling down, people spiraling down into depression and anger and nihilism and cynicism. This is a country that fought World War II. This is a country that has done great things, but too many people are not associating with the possibilities in America today. And that's what we have to do. We have to be both mature enough to recognize that we've got some very, very serious problem, and patriotic and hopeful and faithful enough to claim the possibility that we will get through this and be even stronger. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Now we can talk about anything you want to talk about. Ask me anything you want to ask. Bring up anything you want to bring up, and we'll take it from there. Yes, ma'am.
Caregiving. Caregiving is becoming very important to people as, like you said, the baby boomers are getting older. Many of us do not want to go to a nursing home. That would absolutely bankrupt everything, but you can't afford, especially like I have a friend who is, I should say actually it was my mother. If we didn't have her to support her, she made $13,000 a year. She had to pay rent. She had $700 a month in medical, in health, drugs. And how was she?
It's horrifying.
She couldn't afford to have any kind of health care. Is the government going to realize that healthcare, good health care, I know it's expensive, be part of Medicare?
Well, we should have Medicare for all. We should have universal health care. Right now, among America's seniors, half of them live on less than $25,000 a year. How are they going to afford health? How are they going to afford health care, and how are they going to afford care? We are a society now that throws us away once we are a certain age, and you better have financial.
Right.
You better have financial resources, or some terrible, terrible things that could happen. This is why I feel so strongly. This is why I feel so strongly about universal health care, and it's also why I feel so strongly about a guaranteed living wage, because care workers need to be making more money, because unfortunately, some of them are not performing at the level that we would like to think a caregiver was giving to our parents.
Right.
And that we are afraid, ways in which we're afraid we might be treated if we ever have that need. But then we look at those people, some of whom are making $8 and $9 an hour.
They should be making.
Absolutely. It should be an honorable profession. It should be treated with dignity. It should be compensated fairly. And a guaranteed living wage would make that happen.
I also feel that they should have, I don't know if you want to call it education, but they should be
Trained. I agree with that.
Trained in, not everyone can be a caregiver.
Oh, you're right, and it does take a lot. It does take a lot, and I remember from my own parents, absolutely. I agree with that. There should be training, and there should be licensing. Yeah, there should be training, and there should be licensing.
Just like a nurse or CNA.
Absolutely, because you're dealing with drugs, you're dealing with people bathing, you're dealing with serious things. I agree with you entirely, and I think partly because I'm 71 years old myself, but more important because of what I saw my mother go through. I would have a special dedication to this.
Right, my mother had to go to a nursing home, and because we just couldn't do it, she had to go on Medicaid to go into a nursing home. And that's the other thing. In order to get help for a nursing home, if you so need to do that, we have to, as part of Medicare, you have to prove that they're so desperate they need Medicaid, and
And that doesn't pay for them.
No.
It's just one more profit over people.
Right.
And we need a president who names that. Yes, sir.
I'm wondering what you think about what's going on in Ukraine and what the U.S. role should be in that, where you see the end game.
We poked the bear. Absolutely. We played footloose and fancy-free with NATO. Absolutely. We put Aegis missiles in Poland, which we shouldn't have done. Absolutely. We have a war machine that is a forever war, endless war machine. Absolutely. We've got to take the head off that snake. Absolutely. We need to cut the defense budget. Absolutely. However, nothing that I said, in my opinion, justifies what Vladimir Putin has done to the nation of Ukraine. I look at the military like I look at a surgeon. If America needs surgery, we need to have the best. We need to have the best surgeon on hand at all times. But a reasonable person avoids surgery if possible. What that means is that I would be very, very, very sober about any kind of military support anywhere. I could unilaterally, by the way, when you look at those 750 military installations in 80 countries, I could unilaterally stop some of those, whether it was Syria, Somalia, and so forth. However, it comes down in the final analysis to a gut call about Vladimir Putin. Obviously, we have to have a negotiated settlement. That's the only way this is going to work. There was a meeting in Saudi Arabia just a few weeks ago, and everybody was there. China was there, Brazil was there, India was there, we were there. This is not a unipolar world anymore. This is not just about the United States. This is not just about, this is a proxy war, so the United States is the only player here. Talk to people in Latvia, talk to people in the Czech Republic, Estonia, Lithuania, Sweden, Finland. They don't take it as such a small thing. People very far to the left in those European countries want us to take a stand against this aggression by Vladimir Putin. If you are an anti-imperialist, and of course we should all be anti-imperialists, it's like saying we're anti-thievery, right? Or anti-murder. Of course we're anti-imperialists, and we should call our own country on it when we have imperialistic adventures. Why would we not call Vladimir Putin? Now, some people say, if we just call a ceasefire, that will create peace. I think that's almost laughably naive. If we just say, okay, we're going to have a ceasefire, we're not going to give one more bit of military equipment to the Ukrainians, you would think that is going to be peace? You think Vladimir Putin's going to say, good, well, okay, let's stop now. He'll say, great. There'll be champagne bottles, the corks popping all over Moscow, because now I got him. He went for Crimea, he takes a beat, he comes back for more. If we just stop everything, he will just take another beat and come back for more. Now, I know that that's where some people disagree with me. Some people, friends and people who I really respect, say, no, he won't, no, he won't. And that's like I said, I think some of that gets to a gut call. Of course, we should be supporting every possibility for a negotiated settlement, but I'd like to be a negotiated settlement in which there is still a Ukraine to negotiate. So I believe in the midst of this counteroffensive, winter's coming, so, you know, there's not going to be much that they can do at a certain point, and this should be revisited. But other than the cluster bombs, which I feel are absolutely intolerable, criminal, and I would never, ever in a million years, to be honest, I'm closer to Biden on this than to my other opponents. I support the sovereignty of Ukraine. And I also point out that the way the Ukrainians are fighting, they would not be doing that if they were just tools of the U.S. State Department. Those people are fighting with a spirit. They are fighting with an enormously admirable spirit. They're trying to save their country, and I think we should respect that.
So you think we're going to have to wait it out till Russia is exhausted?
Pardon?
We have to wait out, keep going like we're going,
well, we're
until
going to.
Russia is exhausted and...
Well, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't go as far as Biden. Biden would say as long as it takes. I'm not saying that. And I'm not sure when Russia would be exhausted. No, I'm not that far in that way. No, I'm not saying that. We should definitely be standing for negotiation, but negotiations in which Ukraine has a chance. That's what I want to see. And like I said, with winter coming, in another 2 or 3 months, you know, it's going to be a situation to really look at and to really analyze. And Biden is correct when he says it'll be our own analysis and not Zelensky's analysis. But Biden is not terrible on this topic, in my opinion. And I understand that we have an endless war machine. I'm not naive about that. But to me, that doesn't mean that there's never the appropriate use of or valid reason for military support.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
I'm not sure if you've heard about this situation, but last week I read this article in The Guardian, and it was written by this Dr. Kerry Cunningham. Have you heard of her?
I don't know.
Well, she's an oncologist at Mass General, And she was speaking at one of her organizations about the high suicide rate among surgeons in the country.
Yeah.
And so she was talking about how, she was sharing her own personal story. The woman was crying through most of it, and told about how she felt the need to really come out, and the risk that it would take, what the things she could lose, whether her career or her license, medical license or whatever. So what they did with her is she had to go to a 30-day program in Illinois that is just for medical personnel. And then she came back, and then they sent her on to a 3-month recovery center.
No, wait a minute. You're saying that there's a high rate among the medical personnel
Yes,
who treat veterans?
who treat people. This is not the veterans, is it?
Oh, I thought you were saying something about veterans. I'm sorry, I missed you.
No,
So
no,
you're
no.
talking about high suicide rate among doctors and nurses?
Yes. And their alcohol addiction, their mental health issues, and so what they made her do is, like I said, did the 3 months. And then she was almost gonna lose her license, but somehow that didn't happen. But every day, she has to be drug tested 5 times a day to be able to keep her job. So what they've done is, the doctors, and every doctor has to let people know that they've had mental illness or they're having mental illness, and it has to be documented, and that's part of it.
Well, that's really scary when you start saying that you have to document mental illness. That to me is like so not. Because we have a situation now, somebody goes to a therapist once, the therapist writes down their theory, and that person becomes labeled. So I don't know if I read that article, but I have read articles about what's happening with young kids these days who now might say on the internet, oh, I'm so anxious, I feel so depressed, and then they get labeled, or they say that and a school counselor feels they have to report it. You know, this goes back to Frances Farmer. This goes back to, I remember reading a book about the insane asylums that they used to have in Ireland, where young girls who were just acting out, they just started their menstrual periods, etc., and they'd be thrown in institutions for the rest of their lives. This idea of labeling someone as mentally ill and that being on somebody's record is extremely dangerous. You know, when I'm in colleges, often I will say, the 20s are hard. They're not a mental illness. I mean, the way we have pathologized everything, I think is dangerous. When I think of my own growing up, my own childhood, my own adolescence, my own being in my 20s, oh my God, I would have been labeled with so many letters. Right? I mean, in our generation, you wanted BA, MA, PhD. This is really dangerous. And we're teaching our kids to think of themselves as victims and think of themselves as weak. And that's not only about mental, it's even about their experiences. I listened to a woman one day, and she was standing up and saying about this terrible trauma in her past. And when she started talking about what it was, I thought to myself, well, I went through something much worse than that. But when I grew up, it was never suggested to me that that would define me for the rest of my life. It never, you know, I was cared for. I saw a therapist and all of the associated professionals. But no, it just hadn't become a meme in the culture yet, that this will be, your trauma at the age of whatever will become your calling card for the rest of your life. This is dangerous. This has really weakened us. Everybody's been through something. And I'm not minimizing childhood trauma. I'm not minimizing some of the terrible things people go through here. Could we think about Saudi Arabia for a minute? Could we think about women under the Taliban for a minute? I agree with you that saying that someone is mentally ill and having that on some record because some therapist said it is extremely dangerous. And I think people are getting to the point, I mean, and this is not something that should make us happy, where a lot of us think twice about, do you remember if it was 20 years ago? I'm going to kill you if you do that. Right. You know, a parent might say to a kid, I'll kill you if you do that. And you go, I'm not going to text that. You know? I mean, just the little things where you say, I'm going to strangle you. You know, it's like, no. So I would agree. But none of that can be legislated. I mean, none of this government action isn't the answer to everything. There needs to be an ethical revolution in this country, just as there needs to be a revolution at the ballot box. Yes, sir.
Question. You mentioned the DNC and RNC, which I really appreciate your comments on that because, well, it's just horrible what's going on. But do you have any strategy personally to strike back at the DNC?
Well, all I can do is do what I'm doing, being right here, right now.
Did you ever think of doing what Kennedy did and say,
Pardon?
I might
Well,
just-
Kennedy is leaving. Kennedy has tremendous financial resources, and so he can go run as an independent, right?
You could, I mean, that would be like 2000 if you ran like Ralph Nader did and
Yeah.
siphoned off.
You
the
know,
Democratic
that
vote.
goes back, as I said, to a bit of a gut call. I feel I'm supposed to be right here. I don't know why. It's a little counterintuitive. I don't think that's not what I feel called to do.
I meant it more like if you don't give me a forum where I can talk with Biden, like in a debate,
Well, you wouldn't have it
then
if
I
you,
might consider.
but he's not going to debate. If I run as an independent, that wouldn't make him want to debate me either.
The DNC. If the DNC doesn't give you a debate moment with Biden, or whoever wants to be involved in it, then you could say, you know, I might do it.
Well, I don't think this is the moment to do that. The people I need to speak to right now are you. There is a force power than the DNC. It's the voters in New Hampshire. That's the thing. The one power greater than the DNC is the voters in Michigan, in Nevada, in South Carolina. The way
Why
to
is that?
Pardon?
Why is that?
Because you are primary states. So New Hampshire is the first primary state. So the primaries is where delegates get determined, and then it's a delegate race. Now, they have taken the delegates away from New Hampshire, correct, David? The delegates have been taken away.
That's what they're threatening.
That's what they're threatening. And you'll notice that President Biden's campaign here is a write-in campaign because he threatened New Hampshire and said, if you go first, I'm not going to be on the ballot. So he now has a write-in campaign because he does have an opponent, namely me. They can strip me of delegates here. They can't strip you of the significance of this campaign. And the American people will be watching what happens in New Hampshire. If I do well in New Hampshire, that's going to make people go, wow, maybe she is viable. And then that will help with all manner of resources. So there is no doubt about it. The New Hampshire primary will remain the importance of the New Hampshire primary. Yes, ma'am. And then back to you. Yes.
So I keep getting stuck on the guy who's in charge of the DNC was appointed by Biden, right?
Jamie Harrison. I don't know if he was appointed or elected, but even if he was elected, he was essentially approved out by Biden.
Right. It just seems so creepy and just wrong.
Well, even
And-
before
and
then, when
I
it was
can't-
Keith Ellison running against Perez, it was Obama who said, you know, that's not that creepy because if there is a president, the president is the titular head of the party that he belongs to. So the fact that Biden, at the very least, weighed in heavily on Harrison is not of itself corrupt. What is corrupt, however, is that the DNC is using its power to support Biden. And let's be very clear.
They're only seeing Biden.
They would have you believe I don't even exist. They would have you believe, oh, nothing to look at there. She's unserious. And I think you heard me today, and I would argue that I'm talking about things far more serious than the president is. She's unserious, she's kooky, she's wacky, she's not even a nice person. I mean, they character assassinate. And also the blackballing on media, it's kind of stunning. You know, last time even I had a CNN town hall. Last time I was regularly on CNN and MSNBC. They were satisfied to just call me a joke last time. Now they're angry that I'm here. And it's outrageous because I actually am higher in the polls than most of the Republicans who were on that debate stage the other night. And they are regularly on all of the TV networks. So the invisibilization, the erasure is almost worse than the mockery. It's weird. Polls that don't even mention my name. But then when we publicly remind them, my name gets put back on. But once again, as I have said before to everyone, I say ultimately it doesn't matter what they think. It just matters what the voters in New Hampshire think. It just matters what the voters of Michigan and South Carolina and Nevada think. So the power really is in your hands. And I say that in a very real way. And they would have you forget that. And if you do support this campaign, I hope you will help us. I hope you will canvass with us. I hope you will talk to your friends. I hope that you will talk. You're going to meet Wendy Zoller. I hope maybe you belong to a group that I could come address. Maybe you'd like to come help us to canvass. We canvass every weekend. To phone bank. I mean, it's really just old-fashioned politics. And we have until probably the last week in January. And we can make a big difference here. I don't even have to beat the president for it to be a win, because the delegates aren't going to be counted anyway. But if I make a really good showing, that will affect the political landscape. And already, to be honest, they're already nervous. I won't go that. I don't think they're nervous, but they're annoyed. They're annoyed. Every time I say something, the next week I'll talk about Willow Project. The next week he takes back some land in Alaska. And some people were actually tricked by that and thought it was that he canceled the Willow Project. All of a sudden, I've been talking about an economic bill of rights. All of a sudden, the Democratic Party on their platform, we need an economic bill of rights. So that makes me feel good. It makes me feel good that already I think we're having an effect on their conversation. But I know what these people are like. That's all they're doing. It's very performative. And that's why we need to keep going. Because if you think I'm affecting some things by having these conversations, just think I'll affect things if I win the presidency.
Damn straight.
I read
Yes,
in the
ma'am.
paper the other day that Biden telephoned Jimmy Carter on his birthday to tell him that he rescinded the drilling license in Alaska, because that's what Carter was really for. So I don't know.
Okay, so I'll tell you what that's about. There is an $8 billion ConocoPhillips oil drilling project on the North Slopes of Alaska. When I started talking about that and saying that I would cancel the Willow Project the next day, after a couple of weeks of that, he did stop some oil drilling permits in Alaska. He was caught, basically. The light was shining on it. But it did not cancel the Willow Project.
But
He-
that's what it said. It just said that he told Carter that he had rescinded oil drilling licenses and made President Carter very happy, because that's one of his main things. was to
Well, that's wonderful. I will certainly look into this. What I had read was that it did not include the Willow Project.
It may not.
No, but you're very,
Yeah.
I mean, believe me, I'm going to Google that as soon as we leave here.
Yep.
And even if he did, I'm happy that he did. But I also think, well, that's good that we're having that conversation, and I kept saying it.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Hi, Marianne. My name is Jay. How are you?
Nice to meet you.
Very nice
Thank
to meet
you.
Oh, God. I have lots of questions.
Okay.
Oh, man. So I'm not into politics at all. I'm not registered to vote. The first time I had heard about you, I watched your, when you were announced that you were running, and that was something that like really touched me. Obviously I knew about Bernie, I was all for Bernie, but I felt like I was more for you, so I'm not too educated in politics. Trying to be, one of the things in your videos was that, in order to make a change, we need people to get more involved. So I've so many questions. Even just trying to get a better sense of you as a person. In one of your talks, you had mentioned being in the 60s that you would read Ram Dass in the morning and then do the anti-war. How was that like being back then, and like what did you do? How was it?
Okay, first of all, I want to say something to you. There's a French saying, if you don't do politics, politics will do you.
Yeah.
And obviously you realize that or you wouldn't be here. Okay, so when I was in college, it's exactly what you just said. And I'm sure I'm probably not the only person in this room who remembers that. We would read Ram Dass and Alan Watts in the morning and go to an anti-war protest in the afternoon. There are several things I want to say about that. It was called a counterculture, but it wasn't separated into categories and silos. It was a musical revolution, a political revolution, a sexual revolution. It was just an overturning of an old order. So nobody was told to stay in their lane because it was just change.
I'm involved in a scene pretty much how it was, music, peace and love. It's
That's
new
right.
now, it's electronic music.
And that's the second thing I was going to say. It's very similar to now in a way. I see a lot of things in Gen Z that makes me smile a little bit and think there's a great similarity. And I think it's not an accident that Gen Z was raised by mothers who wrote the kind of books that I have written. There was a whole, you meet with a group of Gen Zs and they'll ask you a question about antidepressants, and then the next question is about Syria. And they don't think that that's weird. Baby boomers would say, whoa, wait, what are we talking about here? Gen Z have a more holistic, whole person perspective, which is actually what we used to have. So that's what it was like. And there are other people in this room who remember it as well.
Okay, I have more questions. So yeah, it's not that I'm like anti-politics or anything. I always have just felt, like if things were working out the way that they should, how are we in this mess in the first place? Like how do our votes really matter like that? Is there not some sort of force greater than our government that is governing all of this? I've never talked to you'd consider yourself a politician, right?
At this point, yes.
Yeah, I would never talk to a politician in my life, so finally talking to someone like you is pretty fucking high up there. I just want some answers.
Actually, given that you're a voter in New Hampshire, our relationship, our power dynamic is you're way up there.
I live in Providence. I traveled an hour and 30 minutes to
Oh,
come here
thank you
today.
so much. Okay, so this is the deal. There was a president in 1980. Now, some people, interestingly enough, this woman mentioned Jimmy Carter. Some people would say that a lot of it started with Jimmy Carter, but certainly it found its full flowering in the 1980s with President Ronald Reagan. That was where the initiation of trickle-down economics, corporate power taking precedence over everything. A Republican president started it, but no Democratic president has stopped it. It goes faster when there's a Republican and goes slower when there's a Democrat. But that's why I said we're still headed towards the iceberg. It's just that with the corporatist Democrat, you'll get there slower and you'll hit it at a different angle. But that's what it was. It was an economic paradigm. It was saying anything that had to do with government helping people was socialist. It was demonizing unions. It was union busting. It was cutting taxes for the very, very wealthy. It was moving resources out of the public good and just moving them into the hands of the private sector. And so what it has done is taken us to this place where there is so much despair on the part of so many people.
And with that despair, so I came here to do some volunteering, and I was out at the Hill trying to get people to come, and it just seemed like the young voters just did not fucking care at all whatsoever, no matter what you tell them, how nice it was. And it just seems like a lot of young people, they think that everything is shit, people are shit, so why care?
Well, we're a big
what do we do about that?
Well, I think it's less about trying to convince other people. I've always said in my career, I'm not trying to get a message out, I need to get a message in. You should, theoretically, the answer is concern yourself less about them and concern yourself with helping us phone bank and canvass. We're a big country. We're not a monolith. Not everybody will agree with you. Bless them and walk on by. There are many young people who do care. There are many young people who do care. And this is less a time to worry about people who don't agree with you and more a time to demonstrate what you think the world should look like, and that is vital citizenship. So some young people don't care. I assure you some people care so much. Yes.
I want to share one quick experience. I had the privilege of being part of a film crew at Obama's first inauguration.
Wow.
Yeah, and I'm telling you, what comes to mind is surreal. You have over a million people, black and white, in a very closed-in area. And there was like, we're all were one. There was such joy.
There was great hope in the air when he was first elected.
And then, people are doing, line dancing and nobody got hurt. There weren't any riots. Coming out of the tunnel and the sun is rising and you see the Capitol building and you see all these vibrant people.
We all remember. I remember I was working for Oprah Winfrey. I was on Sirius Radio. The night he was elected, I got to announce it. I think we all remember it was a magical moment, but in many ways, many of the things that we thought we were giving him a mandate for, the corporations and corporate power, got to him in ways that we did not expect.
That was the feeling we felt, that hopefully he'll be able to do what he promised to do. American people were happy about it if the other parties weren't going to.
Well, let's not. I'm not into this enabling codependent relationship with Barack Obama. There were things which, if a Republican president did them, we yelled bloody murder. If Barack Obama did it, oh poor baby, oh poor baby. They're not letting him. When in fact there would be no evidence that he had even tried. He had stood up for public option. He had stood up for universal health care before he got there. Obamacare was obviously what the insurance companies took. You can go this far. And that's how it works with corporate America and the corporatist Democrats. We'll let you go this far. We will let you ameliorate people's stress, but don't you dare think of challenging our bottom line. If you do, we will primary you. You will lose election after election, and yet the American people will just have all their suffering inevitably return. So I think that what we did today, and I'm grateful to you for that, gave me an opportunity to tell you how I see it. If you do feel moved to support this campaign, the existence of this campaign, please know how grateful I am. I hope that if you feel moved, you will take a button, you'll take a bumper sticker, you'll take I assume we have the yard signs?
Yes.
Take a yard sign, tell your friends. Please tell Wendy over there. You can write to Wendy at Marianne2024.com. Tell her if you know a group. And for those of you who can, thank you for those of you who are volunteering. I hope that you'll consider volunteering. We canvass every weekend. We phone bank, talk it up, tell your friends. When I come back, I'll be at St. Anselm's tomorrow today. St. Anselm's today, and then I leave tomorrow, and I will be back towards the beginning of November. And I hope that you'll tell your friends. Go to Marianne2024.com. Please sign up. You'll know. And if you think that something is awry, something's wrong, rotten in the state of Denmark, but you think that it's time for all of us to rise up and make it better, then I hope you'll say so.